Hello, everyone. Jen doesn't think I'm funny. I think I'm funny. Before we let everyone in, I like to say, let's do it. All right. Hello. Happy Tuesday. Let me get my little friend. Say hello. He's particularly annoyed this morning. Happy Tuesday, everyone. All right. So let's jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. We have a few different topics that we're going to dive into. Actually, two of them just came about randomly as I was doing research, and I was interested and fascinated by them. So I did a little deep dive into those. So it feels a little disjointed as we go, but um, so the main two topics are budget and midterms, and as we enter the 100 days, and then attacks on 501c3 charters, which we've talked about tangentially, but is now coming sort of much more crystallized. So first, just wanted to give a minute to acknowledge what happened in Berlin 2 days ago at their Pride, where someone drove into a group of people, killing one, injuring several. Hundreds of thousands of people were marching on that day, and it just goes to, show or continue to demonstrate why we have Pride. Pride was born out of violence to begin with, and it was a riot, and not a parade. Now it's a parade, but at the end of the day, I feel like it's such a cliche when you hear every Pride was a riot, Pride was a riot. But at the end of the day, it's true. And the folks who organized Berlin Pride said they're definitely going to march next year. So, all right, 100 days until midterm elections. So the Senate is in session only through next week, and then the midterms take over through November 3rd, which is election day. We have 6 big items pending: government funding, the Iran war, FISA surveillance reauthorization, the National Defense Authorization, the Farm Bill, whatever it's gonna, I didn't research that one for you guys. That's not the random thing. And then the SAVE Act. Okay, so likely to pass government funding, which we're going to talk about next, and Iran funding. In limbo is the others, FISA, NDAA, and the Farm Bill. Least likely to survive is the SAVE Act. And I want to bring this up because ultimately, a lot of what I'm seeing in my news feed is all about the SAVE Act. Trump has declared it a non-negotiable. We have to wait several more weeks to see what he means by a non-negotiable, what he's going to do, what they're going to do. But at the end of the day, I do not see the SAVE Act actually passing. But what I'm not sure on is what he would do about, it being a non-negotiable, literal government shutdown. He refuses to sign anything moving forward, he said. He will refuse to do anything as a president until the SAVE Act passes. So we're going to just keep a pulse on that. But ultimately, as far as votes go, it's just not going to. So, and then also something that we're going to do a deep dive in maybe at the next session is an interview that I saw with Bannon on him declaring hands down Trump will have a third term, and that in the coming weeks to months, they will demonstrate why the 22nd Amendment doesn't make it so that he can't have a third term. So he was being interviewed by The Economist, and he just said, she kept bringing back the Constitution, and he kept saying, show me where it says he can't. We'll show you where it says he can. So I need to do a deep dive on that, but there's the beginnings of talks of a third term, let alone the midterms right now. So shutdown clock. Government funding runs out in October, weeks before the midterms. We've seen this a few times. Neither party wants to shut down right now, but what we LGBTQ folks, marginalized folks need to watch for are the riders in the budget, the appropriations bill, rather. That's where the controversial provisions ride. And as we saw in Missouri, and what we talked about at the last session of their 526 anti-LGBTQ bills, and yet there were 805 trans bills. And how did that happen? Where is that discrepancy? If they lie in a budget, then it wasn't an anti-LGBTQ bill, but it still passes. So the NDAA, what is it? What rides on it, inside it? So the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. Annually, Pentagon, it's passed for the last 60 years. It's always passes. And it makes it a magnet for controversial riders because it always passes. So that's where, it's so big and has so many things that if you're going to put one controversial rider, which is super controversial and life-changing to us, but ultimately in the big scheme of things, it ends up passing because folks need to get it passed. And that little, what they deem to be little controversial rider to them is not a big deal, quote unquote. So the House already passed theirs. We discussed that at the last session. The House passed theirs July 22, and the Senate version is in limbo until after midterms. And a conference between the two chambers will then decide what survives. Also really important why midterms are so important, because part of what we talk about today will get decided in October. And then the NDAA, so the appropriations bills, and where NSPM7, the $166 million, that's in October. But then these bills and riders will be decided in the budget in December, post midterm elections. So 2 anti-LGBTQ amendments passed, 1 was defeated. And now this is specific just to the National Defense Authorization Act, again, which will officially get voted on after midterms. So the Tricare ban passed in the House level, the military health system, covering gender-related medical treatment. So everything about trans folks in military was basically being argued through this, through the NDAA. So what did pass was removing their medical care, removing gender-related medical treatment, puberty blockers, hormone therapies, and surgeries, stripping the prior limiting language that only restricted treatments that could result in sterilization. And the result, even more mental health counseling for trans youth under 18 is now prohibited. Tricare covers roughly 9 million service members and dependents. So spouses and children are swept in as far as youth goes. And my news feeds were flowing with it. 5 Democrats cross party line. We're starting to see this more and more. Then the same Democrats are voting just their own constituencies, wanting them to sort of distance themselves from trans issues. And so we saw 5 key Democrats cross party lines on this one. The Mace Amendment and the Boebert Amendment. So Mace Amendment requires Pentagon-run schools to determine schools' eligibilities based on reproductive systems. Again, the Equality Caucus warned that this invites invasive questions and physical inspections of children as young as 4 years old. So going all the way up to kindergarten. And the Boebert Amendment 18 would have codified the trans military ban into permanent law. That was defeated just 212 to 217. And the Equality Caucus rallied hard against it. But so again, we had the ban of trans folks when Trump came into power. That happened. And then they tried to codify it permanently into law. That part failed. So it doesn't undo the folks that were banned in any way, shape, or form. It's just not codified into permanent law. The House declined to ban the service member, then voted to take the service member's family's health care. So ultimately, while they couldn't get the numbers for the codified ban on trans folks in the military completely, what they did do was take away any and all related gender affirming health care. So the budget, so funding for NSPM7, as we talked about last time, funding for $166 million, a joint mission center, a 10-agency hub implementing NSPM7. The request cites that, and it cites NSPM7 by name and repeats all the same language. Words have power. They repeat all the same language: extremism on migration, race, and gender. It is the first official budget document to treat gender extremism as a domestic terrorism category. I mean, I remember with you guys talking about this way back in September of 2025 and saying, listen, it isn't in any government documents. This is just talk, a memo, all the things. And here we are close to 12 months later, and gender extremism is now a form of domestic terrorism. The money funds proactive internet surveillance, including social media and encrypted communications. Yesterday, someone was telling me, I haven't fully gotten the debrief on it, but a guy coming through customs and his phone was taken away, and he had it was an Android. Those phones, so much more technologically savvy actually than our iPhones. And so there's a password mechanism. ICE and Border Control kept asking him for his password. And so he gave him this specific password that when you put in that password, it completely wipes off your phone, unretrievable. And so he gave them that password, and then they couldn't get at his phone and what they wanted. And now he's been arrested and going to be tried for terrorism. And he's connected to like environmental groups, and I forget what other completely non-offensive group. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So how these two connect: the NDAA rider and the NSPM7 money both fall in this year's legislative calendar. The CARE ban survives or dies based on, the NDAA will pass. Okay, it's just not going to, and I don't see there being a red line to that particular rider. So then the $166 million towards surveillance request survives or dies in October, leading into, that's when we're probably going to see a government shutdown. Nobody wants it. It's not over this, in particular again. But I do see this getting approved as well. The funding bills get decided in October, and then the policy bills, whether or not trans-military, whether folks in military get healthcare and whatnot, that gets decided in December. But there are anti-LGBTQ provisions in both the appropriations and in the budget. So connecting more dots. NSPM7, NSMP7, little typo there. It's really hard to type fast, that acronym, but NSPM7 and the Bondi Memo. So again, just sort of connecting all of this together and specific to 501c3. So we're now shifting into attacks on 501c3 charters. So NSPM7 and the Bondi Memo, again, talked about radical gender ideology, gender extremism, how to fold that into domestic terrorism. Part of that, in that 12-agency hub, if you will, they were directed, the FBI and the IRS were directed to create a joint infrastructure, a joint task force, okay, to investigate nonprofits and their funders. So you have the IRS, where our 1023 applications go. That's, who gives us the tax exempt status and the 501c3 status. So they were directed by NSPM7 to create a joint task force together to investigate the nonprofits and their funders. Department of Justice in particular has directed prosecutors to prepare probes of major left-leaning foundations. So what can they do to 501c3 charters? So again, just a refresher: NSPM7, National Security Presidential Memorandum issued by Trump, September of last year. It directs agencies to investigate not just violent terrorist actors, but instead the networks, the organizations, and the funding sources behind them. And again, race, gender, traditional American views on family. I mean, that's like most of us, right? Like, at least it's me. Religion, morality, as common motivators, domestic terrorism. Presidential memo, no Congress, no vote, no court review. The Bondi Memo, issued December 4th, implemented NSPM7, and again includes a radical ideology, lists now potential charges. And through the Bondi memos is where the directives came and the charges that could be launched against folks. And again, directed investigators to map a full network of actors behind political violence. Full network is where the nonprofits, funders, and donors come. Like with everything else, like what we do, follow the money. Right? With the Greater Than Coalition, what did I do? I followed the money. So then you had the servant nonprofit, but that only had a few $1 million in it. But then, you know, who was funding that? Oh, the Hobby Lobby family, which has funded, you know, over $50 million in anti-LGBTQ cases and issues. So NSPM7 item J is a direct order to the IRS to basically ensure that no tax exempt entity, no entity that is not having to pay taxes to this government is directly or indirectly financing political violence or domestic terrorism. So again, if LGBTQ folks, trans folks, folks who fight for LGBTQ rights are domestic terrorists, then any nonprofit that then supports LGBTQ issues, Caravan of Hope, all the way up to the Trevor Project, HRC, Lambda Legal, the American Bar Association, with their SOGI committee. They have a staff member, you know, a paid staff member that heads up the sexual orientation, gender identity committee. So organizations found in violation get referred to the DOJ, indirectly financing, not defined anywhere. I mean, this is one of the most frustrating things. The Supreme Court does it. They did it in Hobby Lobby. Scalia didn't define what a private corporation meant when they said that private corporations could decide for them, family-owned private corporations could decide for themselves whether or not their employees could get contracepted. So indirectly financing is not defined anywhere in the memo. So a grant, a fiscal sponsorship, or a donation can be characterized as indirect financing. March 18th, very quietly, I missed it, the FBI IRS Command Center. Command Center was created, and the FBI and the IRS announced their Joint Mission Control Command Center housed at FBI headquarters. And that's where they began these criminal investigations. And agents rotate through a 1-year assignment examining nonprofits. A Joint Mission Center staffed from 10 federal agencies work to proactively identify networks. It pairs IRS financial investigations expertise with the FBI's counterterrorism tools, i.e. all surveillance, all the things, Doge and Elon and all of, you know, when he wanted all of the IRS documentation, right? The funders are first targets. DOJ officials have directed already U.S. attorneys to prepare probes of the Open Society foundations. So Open Society is one of the largest funders of civil rights and human rights litigation in the United States, George Soros. No charges have been filed yet, but active, you know, this is an open probe and it is the largest. This next slide, I didn't even know how large. But the philanthropic network built by George Soros, founded in '79, now chaired by his son, Alex, the largest private philanthropy in the world, roughly $32 billion given in over 100 countries. The largest funder of LGBTQ issues on the planet, on Earth. I don't know who's, you know, LGBTQ plus in the family or, you know, what, but, and there are other issues ultimately that they fund, from democracy to human rights litigation, criminal justice reform. Independent journalism is a big one. That's what made him popular in immigration rights. And then LGBTQ rights, largest in the world, all over. Big one internationally is decriminalization efforts and campaigns. We just saw non-binary status being criminalized in Ghana. And so, it's expanding. So not just decriminalizing, LGBTQ folks, but we're seeing a rise in criminalization. For us to lose these $32 billion for Open Society Foundation to be targeted as domestic terrorists and funding domestic terrorism, internationally, probably getting grants or granting. That's a big piece, is the international component, providing grants to organizations internationally. So one investigation of a major funder affects hundreds and or thousands of the organizations that it funds. Foundations respond to legal risk by flagging grants to controversial causes. LGBTQ organizations, especially trans ones, are among the first grants to get cut because nonprofits are going to want to de-risk, right? They're not going to want to be on the radar. So they will, we talked about the 525 anti-LGBTQ bills that were introduced, and yet 8% passed, but yet they keep doing it, right? Because it does serve a purpose. It does continue to polarize. It does continue to, initiate hate and confusion among people who don't know. Well, whether or not Open Society gets its 501c3 charter revoked or not, this will have a chilling impact on especially much smaller, mid-sized nonprofits around the country that don't have the bank account in order to bankroll litigation to protect itself. So since it won't want to bring risk to itself, what will it do? It will de-risk what it's funding. HR 6800, it's a legislative track introduced in December of last year, amends Section 501P and let the Treasury basically strip exempt status from organizations providing material support to terrorist supporting organizations. So again, all of this happening with not one headline, but setting the framework. So now you have the investigative, you have the IRS with all the information, combining in a command center with FBI, who has all the surveillance tools, and then legislatively change the laws, one little itty bitty section, to say just amending it. So it wasn't a brand new law, didn't have to be voted on, all the things, just an amendment saying that the Treasury could, strip a 501c3 charter from an organization providing material support. And what else happened in December of 25? On December 4th, the Bondi Memos came out directing this, and then this happened, right? So they were just laying the groundwork for basically where we are today. If enacted, a designation would bypass the normal audit process and its protections. So right now, as we sit here, what can they actually do? Can they strip, Trevor Project's 501c3 charter? Under current law, there are three ways in which a 501c3 can lose its tax exempt status. One is just not filing your 990s. So you don't file your 990s, I think it's 3 years in a row, you automatic revocation. You automatically lose your tax exempt status. An IRS audit, which takes forever. And now this new section 501P, terrorism suspension. So path one, the automatic revocation one, 3 consecutive years. So failure to file a 990 for 3 consecutive years, no investigation needed, no IRS action whatsoever. You just get a letter saying it's been revoked, and I think you can petition to get it back within like 90 days or something like that, but it's automatic. So everyone obviously files their 990 on time. IRS audit. So audits are private. By law, the IRS can't publicly announce them like they've been doing with all of these DOJ subpoenas to hospitals. It's super rare that the DOJ wants to publicly announce when it's, it wants to keep that private until it has its answer. But the DOJ has been publicly announcing every time it attacks a hospital. With this, they're private by law. They absolutely cannot publicly announce or discuss that they're auditing a nonprofit. Process takes months to years. Due process protection, multiple levels of appeals. Most audits, I saw a bunch of different statistics on it, ranging, so I didn't quote one, but ranging from 83% to like low 90s. So most, let's say 80 to 90% of audits end in a settlement and not revocation, because it's usually a money thing. They did something wrong monetarily, so they owe money, so they settle. Okay, as opposed to this terrorism one, which doesn't necessarily need any money. But these audits are super manpower intensive. Even prior to Trump, we didn't have a lot of them. So IRS's staffing reality, is real. The IRS went from over 100,000 to 77 between January and May of last year alone. So huge cut in workforce, and it's only gotten smaller since. And the agency ordered to investigate the nonprofit sectors at its lowest capacity. So there's a specific sector that deals with nonprofits, both granting them, seeing who hasn't filed their 990s, all the things. There's a nonprofit sector. It's not every IRS agent that gets whatever comes across their desk. People specialize. So the nonprofit sector it got the biggest cuts. And so exempt org practitioners report no meaningful IRS crackdown on any organization status to date. And then 501p, the terrorism suspension. So 501p allows immediate suspension of exempt status for supporting terrorism. It was enacted after September 11th and designed for foreign. So it was modified, it was amended in December of 25 to also include domestic, but it came about after 9/11 and wanting to hone in on and identify foreign terrorist organizations. A nonprofit scholar that kept coming up in my research, Jeffrey Tenenbaum, I got his contact information, I'm going to reach out, finds it hard to see how 501p could lawfully suspend an organization that is not supporting foreign terrorists. But I would like his thoughts with the new December memorandum or the December amendment rather, and together with what has happened from 9/11 till now. So he's an expert in this. I am not as hopeful as Jeffrey Tenenbaum. So what's the concern? Again, I alluded to this earlier about just the investigation alone. The investigation alone and what it does to nonprofits financially, if it actually happens to them, but long before it happens to them, the chilling effect. Okay, same thing with, the abortion laws in Texas. Even though they couldn't ban at that time abortion in Texas, the laws were meant to have a chilling effect. Conversion therapy bans in Colorado were deemed to be unconstitutional. So what did we do? We recreated a law that would create a chilling effect. And this has a massive chilling effect. So an investigation imposes costs before any legal finding is made. Like they already have to pay to fight it long before. So just an accusation. Legal fees and staff time get diverted from mission to defense. Directors and officers' insurance premiums increase, usually cost prohibitive at that point. Banks de-risk. They're not going to lend, or they would call a loan. I've been on boards where, not for this obvious reason, but just financially things got tight and banks wanted to have a sit down. They need to de-risk their line of credit, right? What's happening? We've seen the revolving amount in your bank account. So accounts get flagged, delayed, closed. Board members push the organization to go quiet. So already happening, Trevor Project, the administration is going to restore the LGBTQ youth service hotline. Well, that contract was a massive source of funding for the Trevor Project, and reporting, it's not definite yet, but reporting indicates that the Trevor Project will be excluded from that new contract. And Mackenzie Scott, Bezos's ex-wife, who's a bajillionaire now and basically a philanthropist and giving all of her money away, gave $45 million specifically to the Trevor Project. And private donors are both going to be instrumental in nonprofits, staying alive, but also putting themselves on a list. And we'll talk about that. Private litigation pressure. So we have, government contracts and, government pressure, ultimately private litigation. J.K. Rowling, so annoying, has publicly threatened to finance and back legal attacks on Amnesty International over its reporting and studies of anti-trans rhetoric. So it's just doing objective studies and reports internationally on anti-trans rhetoric and its impact on society, on folks, on mental health, on suicide. And J.K. Rowling wants to sue and has all the money in order to fund it. So advocates describe the tactic as suing organizations into the ground or into quietness, into no longer doing that, right? So some will flat out be sued into the ground. They'll just go bankrupt. Others will just stop doing the thing. Government investigation on one side, private litigation on the other, and both target the sources of funding, not the actual trans folks, not the actual LGBTQ folks that they're actually serving. This is when I went into a little bit deeper. I mean, we all know DEI, right? Everybody backed off of DEI and which companies did, which companies didn't. But this number was staggering to me. I mean, HRC's Corporate Equality Index has been around for decades. And out of Fortune 500, 65% of the Fortune 500 companies dropped off. 65%, that is massive. Corporate censorship of pride events continues to decline. Corporate giving is a major revenue. I mean, there were major pride events that just didn't happen this year due to lack of funding. Right? Like now we need sponsorship money. Back when Pride was a riot, we needed bail money. Now we need sponsorship money, and the sponsorship money is completely dried out. Companies, again, are de-risking before they get on any government lists and any government pressure. So some things that are happening to counter all of this, absolutely shocking, but California has the first and only right now is SHIELD law. SHIELD law protecting nonprofits from federal targeting. Like, this is a real thing. And now states need, so, they can't prevent the IRS from removing their 501c3 charter at the end of the day. So they would still have federal tax. But if that does happen to them, the state of California says they still maintain, which at the end of the day still puts the organization out of business. I mean, it's the 501c3, it's the IRS tax exemption that really, matters, but they wouldn't lose their tax exempt status within the state of California and or any California contracts, any California, anything. So, and we'll talk more about Talbot. So federal court, this is tangential yet related, but just a few weeks ago, a federal court certified a class action protecting trans service members from discharge, and that is playing into all the testimony around the budget and appropriations bills around. So, where this litigation goes, it won't be done before the funding happens, but ultimately, this is what we're doing to counter everything that's happening. And this one was a huge win. To have a class action certified for trans service members is going to go a long way, in my opinion. And then this is, the Mackenzie Scotts of the world, or even, within any organization's budget, you could be deemed to be a big donor for that budget. Obviously, 45 million is a big donor within the Trevor Project, but if an organization has a budget of 200, 300,000 and you make a $50,000 donation, right? So the donor effect. So now we've seen the chilling effect on 501c3 organizations generally not wanting to do the work, wanting to de-risk and not fund certain grants, not be involved in certain efforts. So you have that chilling effect. And then you have the donors of the nonprofits, right? So fear exposure, association, being on lists, and we'll talk about lists and here in a second, but major gifts until, pause until things settle down, foundations add compliance conditions and grants, and fear-driven donor flight, defunds an organization faster than any IRS process could. Americans for Prosperity v. Bonta. So this is a Supreme Court case in 2021 that conservatives brought. And it held that government can't compel charities to disclose their major donor list. So this is a case that, again, conservatives wanted. Conservatives won that per the First Amendment, donor privacy is protected by the First Amendment and freedom of association. But we see that they're trying to get lists from healthcare, hospitals about patients and all of the things. So yes, this case exists. I wouldn't say, oh, I'm shielded. No one will ever know my name if I donate $1 million to HRC. I just don't think that, especially because with NSPM7 and using domestic terrorism as the reason and a crime, just like how I think they get around the civil subpoenas and now are issuing criminal subpoenas, is you can't say no if the goal or the impetus behind it is to stop terrorism. Then you get whatever you want, right? So this case was not around terrorism. So I don't see how this case will, completely hold, and it'll get litigated and it'll go up, and then the Supreme Court will find that there's a difference. So just keeping that in mind, that even if you are not a 501c3 organizer yourself, but instead a major donor, right? All the ways in which they can compile lists. So again, if you donate, donations remain obviously tax deductible. Your name on a major donor list should be shielded. I don't think that will stand muster with domestic terrorism. Organizations need sustained individual giving the most, and donor flight is one of the intended outcomes, in my opinion, of all of this pressure. So like myself, what if you run a 501c3 organization, are a part of a 501c3 organization, on the board of a 501c3 organization, obviously file your 990s, but specific things that I'm doing: keeping governance current, conflict of interest policy, board minutes, documented grant purposes. A lot of especially small to mid nonprofits don't have their paperwork in order. One little audit and you don't have all your I's dotted, T's crossed. Review fiscal sponsorship and pass-through grants. This one's big. There are a lot of nonprofits out there that act as fiscal sponsors for other organizations, and they don't really keep an eye on what that other organization is doing. They're just the fiscal sponsor for it, and they get 10% of anything that organization raises. But indirectly financing. So a larger nonprofit who has a fiscal sponsorship of an organization that does something that then gets in the crosshairs, now the larger organization is also in the crosshairs. Okay, so you will be responsible for anyone that you are a fiscal sponsor for. Screen your international grants if you get them, if you accept them, and or give them partners against the OFAC sanctions list. Maintain communications, your comms, communication discipline. Public statements can become exhibits and investigations. Like really, really, truly watch. Again, Caravan of Hope is super small, but even some of the larger nonprofits that I'm on the board of don't have a communications committee, right? There's a governance committee, there's a fundraising committee, there's a personnel committee, there's the executive committee. To have a comms committee is not, Usually you have to be fairly evolved in order to do that. Maybe you have a PR person on there, marketing people, but really maintaining your comms discipline, being careful about what you put out into the ether, especially on social media and all the things. Have a written response ready. Again, that would be part of the comms committee. But have a written response ready for federal inquiry, including designated counsel. As far as designated counsel, this last bullet is a big one. I've volunteer for volunteer lawyers for artists, and one of the things that we will often recommend for folks who need more counsel than what our sort of nonprofit, status and ability bandwidth can do for them is every state has a nonprofit association or legal coalition, and you can have shared counsel. So to be a part of that, to be a member of that, part of just being a member of that is nothing's happened to you, but if anyone else in the state has gotten a letter, then you'll just know, oh, early warnings. This has happened in Illinois to so-and-so. What are they doing? And, just early warning, not just if you need the assistance, but just keeping, your ear to the ground, if you will, in your particular state. I find that super helpful. Diversifying revenue. So if you are completely dependent on private donors, they may go away. If you're completely dependent on grants, they may go away because the grant giving organization is going to want to de-risk. The donors aren't going to want to be on a list, right? So really try whatever you are dependent on. Again, the perfect trifecta, if you will, for nonprofit revenue building is a third, a third, a third. I have never met a small to medium-sized nonprofit that has managed to get that ideal of a third, a third, a third. A third government grants or contracts rather, and/or grants, a third of grants, private, and then a third of donors. Okay, so really trying to diversify at this time. Review your D&O insurance coverage. I mean, I don't think they're going to have a protect us if we're deemed to be terrorist clause, right? So, what will that look like? But at least having a conversation with your provider and the person there that this is something that you're concerned about because you serve the LGBTQ community, and what would happen? What would coverage look like? Because if D&O isn't going to cover you, I don't know a board member that's going to want to stick around. Adopt a written document, retention policy, and keep the client and donor records you only actually need, because records you do not hold, cannot be subpoenaed. Let's be real. All right. So again, no LGBTQ organization, has been formally investigated under NSPM7 to date. The named targets so far are Open Society Foundations Foundation, which again is the largest funder of LGBTQ organizations and issues in the world, and groups framed as Antifa related. So those are the only open probes that we are aware of right now. The power to revoke the 501c3 charter is narrow, slow, and protected right now. The pressure campaign works, like I said, through fear, chilling, funders, banks, insurers, removing the D&O. Sorry, we're not going to cover that. And then boards, people not wanting to be board members on LGBTQ specific or trans specific nonprofits. 0 organizations have lost status right now, and compliance and documents and knowledge, really D&O insurance, making that phone call and finding out what would happen if, okay, but being in compliance, having documentation, and or not having documentation as far as donors go, is everything. All right, so I dived deeper into this again because I was really shocked by that 65% drop. I mean, I did a talk with the chief diversity officer of eBay, and I had the thought to ask her on the panel whether or not they filled out the Corporate Equality Index, and they had. So they are one. So I had the thought of asking, but I just didn't know the numbers of how many actually fell off. So from out of Fortune 500, the participation went from 377 companies down to 131 from 25 to 26. And I'm sure it fell just not as drastically from 24 to 25. Okay, but this year in 26, that's a single 65% drop. We know all the big ones, that walked away. That's what we've heard about. But still, close to 1,500 companies participated, right? The 65% is around Fortune 500 in particular. That's where the money is. That's where the sponsorships over Pride is ultimately. 534 earned perfect scores covering roughly 6 million. Here's what's interesting. HRC's own year after year analysis found that the underlying policies were sustained and or even increased. So they still looked at the companies who didn't submit their information. I mean, these policies are available online. No declines across any criteria. Ultimately, they just didn't want to publicly report. So they didn't all of a sudden become anti-LGBTQ. They just didn't want to put their names on this list. They didn't want to be public about the fact. So no decline, some even increased, and yet they didn't publish and or try to get the coveted HRC Corporate Equality Index. So visibility retreat, not a policy retreat. And we're going to see the same with funding of 501c3s. All right. So life hack. We're going to keep doing them because we need them. We need to end all of this depressing stuff with a life hack. And then we have time. So we'll do questions and or shares, gratitudes, anything you're proud of, anything going on in your neck of the woods. I don't know if Noelle woke up from Hawaii, but on the school community, she said that she keeps sleeping through these. I don't know what time it is in Hawaii, but she set her alarm. So if she is here, we'll say hello to her. But so notice your longings. Longings, and the way that I describe these two things, longings are when your eyebrows go up. You think of something and your eyebrows go up. A discontent, right, is when your eyebrows go down, like something you tolerate, right, or a discontent. So just through a given day, notice what makes your eyes and your eyebrows go up. Like that's when you're being pulled by a vision. That's when you're being pulled somewhere that you need to notice and notice what that thing is, and then go further down that path, whatever it is. This actually came up in why I wanted to do this today. It came up in an estate planning design meeting yesterday. I'm meeting with this couple. They have very, very few family that they're close with. They one's completely disowned. The other one's mom is alive but dementia. But other than that, siblings, no relationship, everyone MAGA and all the things. And so as we're talking about like where you're going to leave, and they're going through the family planning process. So we're doing their estate planning and their confirmatory adoption. And so this was a meeting where we were talking a little bit about both. And when we got to the asset distribution section where I said, okay, everything to one another, yes. And then if you're both in that car accident together, down to the child, yeah, for sure. Okay, now all three of you are gone. Then what? And they were like, and right away, the one woman was like, oh my God, our three closest couple friends that we've met through the IVF support group in the last 3 years. Like eyebrows went up. And then the other one was like, but I mean, your mom, like the other with her eyebrows down was like, but, and then I saw the woman's energy and I go, well, I guess my sister and my niece and everything about was discontented with that. And I was like, what would you love? What would you love? If you were gone tomorrow, and the one woman who said her IVF support group, has significant wealth. And I said, if you were gone tomorrow and you couldn't take care of your wife and you had no child, you're gone tomorrow, what would you love? And she said, absolutely to fund, charities that help do this and these three couples that without them, I don't know that we would have gotten through this process over the last 3 years. So they're still marinating on it. right? But, and I said, the only time I saw your eyebrows go up was when you said that IVF support group. And she said, you're absolutely right. So notice, and, anyone else would look at that estate plan and be like, what? I mean, those three couples would be shocked if God forbid they were in a car. Like, they're on a group text thread, right? Like, but over 3 years, they've gotten to be so close. But that's your vision. That's what you love. And then when you're discontented or you tolerate, right, you're being pushed by your pain. We tolerate things. I challenge you to list 10 things. I was challenged last week by my business coach to list 100 things that I tolerate. I mean, there are that many. And I made a lot of changes in the last week, because as I started making that list of things that, I had a VA, a virtual assistant. She was horrible in my emails, but I was tolerating it because it was like somewhat helpful. I got off that call. The first thing I did, I was like, it's not working. Now I got nobody in my emails, but I'm no longer tolerating that. So, at the end of the day, we tolerate so much because we're so busy doing the thing that we don't even notice what, we're just numb to that level. So, and then once you've done that, right? So you look at your longings, your discontents. At the end of the day, you can only do, and we try to do too much. Do what you can from where you are with what you have. Do the littlest thing that you can towards your vision from where you are right now, not where you want to be, with what you have. And that's why we tend not to do anything, because we're waiting for that time that we have more money, that, after when I'm retired and when I do, and just do what you can from where you are with what you have, the smallest thing to get yourself closer to an eyebrow up. We deserve it. This is our one life to live. Okay, it's not a dress rehearsal, people. And remind yourself that you always have way more than you're cognizant of. So you'll be able to find something. All right. Stop share. What do we got? Any questions? Any shares? Anything in the chat, Jen? I was at Tokyo Pride last month, the number of corporate sponsors. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of international folks, night and day, in some countries, right? Not all. Someone give me something they're proud of. Come on. Something, or interested in, or something that we talked about. I feel like I always go up right up until, all right, Jimmy, what you got?
Everybody, want to share that I've posted for our church group links for them to register to join these sessions. And it's important because there's so many diverse people in our congregation. And this Sunday, we are having an estate planning session after services with a retired priest, with our priest who was a retired estate planning attorney. And they've asked us to sit in on that discussion to bring our point of view. And my point of view, frankly, comes from Angela, right? That we need to have particular verbiage in our wills, special considerations for children or special needs children. So I'm proud that over the past year that I've been with you, I have something to say at the table, literally.
That's awesome.
That's coming this Sunday. So
that's awesome. If you want to email me, I'll send you like a breakdown of the 9 documents, so you have it if you don't already. Here, let me I'll put my email in the chat, and it'll just break down the 9 documents and, be helpful to refer to. But and that's so helpful, like you said, a diverse congregation, right? Where to be the voice, folks asked me, there was a time about 4 or 5 years ago where I was on, all these nonprofit LGBTQ boards. And then I told myself, no more LGBTQ boards I'm going to be on straight boards. Now, boards aren't gay or straight, but I just meant non-LGBTQ specific, not about, trans youth or about LGBTQ funding but instead the National Adoption Center. And then I would be the LGBTQ voice on the board of the National Adoption Center. And that is so important because that estate planning session is going to be, without Jimmy's, feedback, is going to be so standard, like so just 5 documents, probably not even a trust, maybe just a will, right? And yet the trust has been our marriage recreation tool for 50 years, right? But a traditional estate planning attorney wouldn't just haphazardly say you should have a revocable trust, right? And so and without fail, when allies, so I do estate planning talks to ERGs and for companies, and the companies will always allow anyone to join the webinar. And so without fail, some cool, woke allies, straight folks will join to see what is different about LGBTQ estate planning. Without fail, the majority, I would say 90% of the feedback I get, people who Google me to find my contact information, take the time to email me, are the straight folks who joined. I was shocked. I had no idea you needed travel cards to be able to see your spouse in a hospital because you're in another country where your marriage isn't recognized. No idea that was even, that you guys even worry about where you book tickets to, right? Without fail. So that's awesome. Jimmy, and you're going to change minds. So I can't wait to hear about it the next session. Anyone else? I've heard Puerto Ricans can apply. Yes. Yeah, one of my clients is going through that process now. Spain, Sherry, Spain just went from 5th most friendly country in the world to #1. It beat out Malta. So everybody wants to go to Spain. If you have this Puerto Rican, tie-in, you're going to beat a whole bunch of folks. Like I said, I have a couple that are going that route. I don't know how it's going with them. I can check in with them and find out. But yeah, Spain is super, super, super LGBTQ friendly. Phyllis.
Hi, good morning. I just want to say that these sessions are like very helpful, and it was great to meet you when you came to Memphis, and just the work that you're doing. And so Jimmy was reminding me about something that happened. And I'm so just in the throes and just being in Tennessee and just all the stuff that's going on here. One of my colleagues who actually works for our trustee's office that's here in Shelby County in Tennessee reached out to me about helping the population that I work with in doing the estate planning. Because they got funding to be able to do it for free. And they are partnering with one of our local nonprofits that provides legal assistance. And so all three of us are in the process of kind of like mapping that logistically out so that way we can do an event to help people to walk
That's
through a
awesome.
lot of that. So thank you so much for the
So
work that you're doing.
tell me more. Who are the 3 moving
So
parts? So you're with who?
love doesn't hurt. So we help to provide crisis intervention for victims of crime in the LGBTQ plus community in Shelby
Yeah, I
County,
do remember meeting
Tennessee.
you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And so the Shelby County Trustee's Office, I've been working with them for years to do financial literacy and getting people like one-on-one financial counseling, because they do it for free and they do it for as long as like you need it. And so they just incorporated this part of their program to help with estate planning. So we're going to be partnering with them, and also we have a legal entity that's called West Tennessee Legal Services, and I've been partnering with them and getting legal counsel for some of our clients, because a lot of times we need help around like order of protections and like divorces and second parent
Mm-hmm.
adoptions and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, or if we have issues with landlords. So all three of us are going to be coming together to do an event here in Memphis for individuals in the community that need work around like estate planning.
That's awesome. That's huge. I mean, especially for the folks that you serve. I mean, durable powers of attorney, being able to make sure that they can, control their own finances,
Mhm.
issues with landlords if they need to leave, but they're breaking a lease, right?
Yeah.
Like all these three need to come together. I have chills. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about that. So thank you, Jimmy, for reminding me because I had completely forgot about it.
That's awesome. All right. Anyone else before we sign off? Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. It was awesome seeing you all. We'll get the replay out along with the deck, and we will see you in 2 weeks. As far as a topic, I'm thinking it's going to be Trump's third term, 22nd Amendment breakdown. Also, Griswold. I don't know why this is coming up right now, but there's just a lot in my newsfeed around the Supreme Court case lineage that led to marriage equality and taking down Griswold. I guess because of IVF and the right to privacy. But so it's being attacked because the Heritage Foundation wants to attack IVF, ban surrogacy and prevent LGBTQ folks from being able to have children using IUI IVF. But to do that means to overturn Griswold. To overturn Griswold is what gave us marriage equality, and the right to an abortion, and. So in Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion with the Dobbs case, he said we need to revisit the lineage of Griswold, skip Loving v. Virginia, and then mention the next, other cases, conveniently skipping Loving v. Virginia. But so there's a lot of talk about like what is Griswold? Why is this case from, the 70s, like basically the bedrock, if you will, of marriage equality? And why is it under attack now? But from a non-marriage equality standpoint, but would absolutely impact marriage. So in between those, we shall see. There's always a lot to cover. And then whatever happens between now and then as well. So happy Tuesday. Love you all. I will see you next LQA.